Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look in this webinar at how XchangeCore was used in the Ardent Sentry and Gotham Shield exercises. And in doing this, we're going to be looking at both XchangeCore as the technology as well as XchangeCore, which powers SABER, which is the organization, Single Automated Business Exchange for Reporting, that brings companies together in a public-private partnership to share information with government. So an implementation of XchangeCore. So we're going to start out by taking a look at Gotham Shield exercise, take a look at the participation of SABER and XchangeCore, the experience that was gained during that exercise, and then lessons learned that came out of it. And follow the same pattern in Ardent Sentry, but Ardent Sentry is a combination of XchangeCore and the military version of XchangeCore, which is called Keystone. And this enables a military-civilian exchange to take place, so a slightly different approach. In both cases, it's using XchangeCore to bridge previous gaps between the public and the private sector, between military and civilian operations. We'll take a quick look at the updated website and open it up to questions. So let's start off with Gotham Shield. Took place last month in the New York City area, and it was a improvised nuclear device, radiological device. It was set off just across the river from Manhattan, and the initial estimates of the problem were shown here with big problem right at the center, fewer problems as you move away from this relatively small but nonetheless significant explosive device at 10 kilotons. And then the little red plume that's up there is the first indication of wind direction. And as we'll see later, it ended up pushing hazardous radiological particles up into the Hudson River Valley. But it was FEMA's annual exercise for different problem areas, this one being in the nuclear and in the New Jersey, New York area. The part that SABER XchangeCore supported was providing information into FEMA's National Business Emergency Operations Center. New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut were also playing in this exercise, along with a number of others. All of them were offered the opportunity to take the SABER data, but it wasn't the focus, and we really got no reports back on whether them actually moved it into their operations. Now in New Jersey, there's an active XchangeCore program, but they weren't directly participating in the exercise. So the real focus was the National Business Emergency Operations Center. The goal of a SABER XchangeCore implementation is to get business status information from many different companies, process it through SABER, and then expose it out to the NBEOC, of course, but any other state or regional business emergency operations center or ESFA team that wants the information. And if you take a look at the saberspace.org website, we've got probably 6 or 7 states now, half a dozen business emergency operations centers, and probably 20 other regional or local governments that are consuming the SABER information. Our specific exercise focused on this process, collecting business information, processing it through SABER, and then who made use of it in the recipient organizations. What SABER itself does is support the private sector to reduce the hassle, and it is a hassle, to provide business status information. SABER originated in a request from the state of Florida to XchangeCore saying, could we use this to collect a bunch of information from companies and get it in one consistent format? Walgreens got involved and gave us the business model from the private sector side for doing that. And the whole effort was expressed by Florida saying, we've got dozens of national companies that we need to contact to find out whether they need anything and whether they're operating and whether they can support restoration after a hurricane, and hundreds and hundreds of local companies that we would like to have that information about but have no capacity to get it. On the company side, Walgreens said when a hurricane rolls up the coast, touching Florida and South Carolina and Georgia all the way up to Maryland or New Jersey, we have 1,000 requests for business status of our stores, and our job is to open stores. So that was really the problem statement that SABER started with. Using XchangeCore, we built this single point for electronic submissions to really help to put the focus on, for the companies, on continuing their normal, moving towards normal operations, and let them skip the whole process of reporting to government. And for the government side, to allow them to have one place to go to then get the data in their own software. So we wanted to deliver, as XchangeCore does, standardized formats so that the consumer can do anything they want with the data. That lets everybody visualize, process, and analyze using the tools that they use every day. SABER's participation exercises, and we've done a lot. We go back to, I believe it's national level exercise 14, and a number of probably an exercise every 3 months or so that SABER is supporting. And we do that by standing up a SIM center. And that SIM center delivers business status information in one of two ways. In an active way, companies want to play in the exercise, and they play in the exercise through SABER by using their SABER account, providing the business status throughout the course of the exercise, and governments then have the business status as really additional stimulus information for their exercise. Passive way is a company says, hey, you got something going on in New York. Here are all of the facilities that we have in the New York, New Jersey area. SABER SIM Center, go ahead, pick out some of these as you're watching the exercise that logically would be business closures, and you simulate closing them. And we can do that in support of the government exercise. So companies get involved and they are exercised, or SABER itself becomes a simulation center for the government operation. How's it all work? Well, we've got an architecture here. And the provider side of the architecture, and you've probably seen this before, 3 different ways to get information into SABER and XchangeCore. The automated format, the quick win spreadsheet, and then the SpotOnResponse Mobile App. For the Gotham Shield exercise, SABER is always running. So it's an XchangeCore 2.0, the SABER website. SABER connector is most often used in exercises because it gives us the ability to, in the Sim Center, to be able to go down and modify the closure information to support the exercise that's going on. All these are in the cloud. Google Cloud hosts both the SABER connector and the SABER XchangeCore. And the SABER members website is available throughout the exercise, just as it is 24 hours a day, all year long, for a SABER member to do their own activity. Just a note, option 1, the fully automated connection, well, we have one more company that's talking right now. Walmart currently is the only one that's providing a live current store status connection. But it is, in fact, a live connection. So during an exercise, we work with WorldArc to simulate closures using both the SpotOnResponse app and then the quick win spreadsheet in there. So that's how we're functioning to be able to provide that simulation information. Who is playing on the SABER side? We had information available from Walmart, Lowe's, Target. For the first time, we had the Hughes satellite credit card transaction system that represents about across the country, 100,000 or so, hotels, gas stations, pharmacies, restaurants, anybody who's making credit card transactions. And the credit card transaction is a proxy, and it's only an approximate proxy, but it's a proxy for whether the facility is open or closed. Some of the organizations say it's only an approximate proxy because, as many of the pharmacies say, they can still do credit card transaction using the old paper way, and they keep them stacked up in the back. So if there is an emergency, they're able to continue to sell out everything that they have using the credit card, paper credit card receipts, and don't need the credit card transaction. So it's a good approximation of open-closed status. The height of the exercise, we had more than 1,800 individual business closures being reported through SABER. So that's the provider side. The consumer side of the architecture had multiple different applications connected to it. SABER XchangeCore provides SOAP connections, a GeoRSS feed, a KML feed, a GeoJSON feed that's new, and just some illustration of the applications that were connected here. Google Earth using KML, the SABER status map that's always published and available, and usually contains the last exercise information on it. ArcGIS Online, very popular common operating picture, and then the SpotOnResponse Mobile App that I mentioned earlier. In this exercise, the SABER status information was primarily provided at the federal level, was provided out to the National Business Emergency Operations Center and the Department of Health and Human Services GeoHealth platform, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The SABER status map, and I'm now going to go through a series of the experience captures that we have here. SABER status map was up there running the whole time, and this happens to be showing a combination of Walmart closures and then the Hughes credit card transaction proxy map. And this, I believe, was on the first reports coming out after the event and showing the stores that were beginning to close as a result of the detonation, which took place just that little person icon there, just off to the left of that person with all the winds heading to the north. Just now going to touch on a number of different apps, the SpotOnResponse app, since you know that it puts data in, also pulls the information out. Here we're showing an area of interest of 10 miles from ground zero of the event, and the icons are showing hotels and gas stations, pharmacies, and food suppliers. Another example, same information coming out in a different format to different types of users, an ArcGIS Online, and it shows all of those businesses in the immediate area of the radiation. Again, different format, different visualization, but that's the key to XchangeCore, is that we, as XchangeCore, are not determining what an end user is doing with the information, but rather providing it and making it available, and they then use it inside of their own applications. GeoHealth was a great example. First day of the exercise, I think it was right after, we did a presentation, SABER did a presentation on the, maybe this was the week before, I forget which. Anyhow, SABER did a presentation on the NBEOC planning session. And then after each one of the days of the exercise, the NBEOC held a update session at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that was both simulating what the NBEOC would be doing to communicate to the private sector, and also as part of really generating stimulus material for the private sector to continue playing through the next day. And SABER, as part of the stimulus material, was then used by some of the companies to sort of model their own response and the likelihood where their stores would be closed. Having heard that, one of those two sessions, GeoHealth platform, Department of Health and Human Services and their Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response contacted me and said, listen, we've got GeoHealth, which I personally had never heard of before. And they explained that, it says here, situational awareness helps them manage resources for planning, and they use it all the time for all types of emergencies. And they said, can we get the SABER data? So live, real time, during the exercise, couple of consultations, passing information back and forth, a little bit of testing, and they were able to incorporate into GeoHealth the SABER information. And by the second day, might have been the second and third day, but overnight, we had GeoHealth platform consuming the SABER data, showing two things. One, the standard formats that we use coming out of XchangeCore allowed them to experiment and pick the one that was appropriate. And also, as you can see down at the bottom, that looks pretty familiar, that is the SABER all status reports, and you see the list of all the incident information coming over on the left-hand side, and they are using an ArcGIS Online as their base application. So a lot of familiarity with that particular application, which allowed us to very rapidly distribute data to a brand new organization that now is extending the SABER information into the healthcare arena, which is important just as a side note because we're seeing more SABER participation on the provider side from healthcare. Los Angeles County Clinic Association, for example, exposes their clinic status for 300-some clinics, and it's a project that's rolling out right now, to the XchangeCore that then can share that to the SABER XchangeCore, which would then make local clinic healthcare information available to the GeoHealth platform. So we're starting to weave lots of different disciplines together as we evolve in SABER, in particular from retail stores into more healthcare on the one hand and critical infrastructure on the other. Water supply and electric supply are two areas that SABER is beginning to consume that kind of information. So GeoHealth was a great fun diversion in the exercise. An example of Google Earth, and this one I mentioned here, the quoted quick win there. This is one that we often find when somebody says, gee, can I participate right now? I can talk them through on the phone downloading a copy of Google Earth if they don't have it, and doing up there in the upper left-hand corner where it says add, we can add and paste in a URL that brings in all that SABER, and you notice under the places there, the highlight is SABER all incidents. There's all the incidents of, I think it was it says day 3 up there. So you can get involved in SABER at no cost. So now let's turn our attention to some of the lessons learned coming out of our Gotham Shield exercise. First one is about participating in exercise, and I think that's an important lesson learned for government agencies, that SABER members are willing to participate, and they do that by simulating their closed stores, either they doing it themselves or providing information for the SABER Sim Center. That's a very important input to an exercise, but SABER needs some information from the exercise designers about the impacts to really be useful, because in this particular exercise, it wasn't, we had a little bit of information first thing in the morning, that little circle and that I showed right up at the beginning about where the impact area seemed to be, and it wasn't until the 2 o'clock call that we started getting some better information about where that weather was and where the plume was going to go, which allowed us that afternoon to do some better simulations. So by the second day, we had a picture of what was happening in the second day. So sort of doing it as you would real time. But point of this lessons learned is, if you're doing an exercise, you could bring SABER in a little bit earlier into the exercise, provide some illustrative impacts, SABER could perhaps add some more meaningful substance to the exercise discussion. And for the NBEOC, I sat there with my SABER stuff saying, gee, if I had known where that circle was, I could have provided to the NBEOC at that moment the depiction of current store closures as a result of that they then could have provided back to all the companies and said, gee, if you were providing your information in through SABER, we could very well have had your stores up here and had simulated that information. And that's made it richer, I think. We've done that really effectively with a couple of state exercises where SABER is sort of built into the beginning. So this lesson suggests that SABER could actually assume an unofficial simulator role through the SABER Simulator, Sim Center, if we got a little bit of information to help support the exercise goal. And the counterpoint of that is there's always the risk that if we don't have the information, it's why we didn't do anything during the first several hours of the exercise. We don't have information about what the impact is, and we just have a couple stores out there saying, oh, I heard there's a nuclear explosion, I'm going to close stores in the Northeast. You could end up with misinformation coming in to the exercise and thus perhaps not be very helpful to the exercise designer's objectives. So very sensitive to that. Next lesson was that GeoHealth integration. That mapping application, because it was based on ArcGIS, because SABER puts out multiple ways to connect an ArcGIS, GeoJSON, KML, GeoRSS, it all depends what they wanted to use. SABER became a layer on that environment, and they were then able to use the SABER information as part of their stimulus information for Health and Human Services response to this. So lesson there demonstrating the versatility of the XchangeCore information, and for us at SABER, the lesson that we need to continue to find out where all these other applications are, because on the SABER side, it's relatively easy to include GeoHealth. It was a lot harder to find out that the GeoHealth even existed. So those of you on the call, if you have anything that sounds like you might want to share, or you come across information that is related to SABER, certainly please let me know what's going on and see whether we can't possibly get some information in there to support your exercises. Let's see. Next lesson learned, a content standard. XchangeCore uses NEAM, content compliance, formats that into a number of other different standard formats. But there is no content standard for the kind of information about business status. So one of the projects that we're engaged in right now is reaching out to all the different private sector groups and saying, okay, tell me what it is that you normally provide. We're building a great big template, finding out what common data elements there are, where other data elements are. In order to develop, and the word standard should be in a quote because we have no intention of becoming a standard setting organization or probably even pushing this through the standard setting group. It'll become a best practice is probably a better word. For what businesses want to provide, and then playing that against the government side, saying, okay, now if you're getting all this information, what might be missing here? And maybe we can take that back to the government side. This development of the content standard was supported nicely by Hughes content on the provider side, and then on the GeoHealth content on the consumer side, trying to figure out where that balance was. And it really focused on flexibility. And there's something called other Pesky data that's a best practice that the XchangeCore community has promulgated over the last few years that allows you to take information and, in a sense, float it through a NEAM formatted set of information. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, so that you can get things that nobody ever thought of. Lesson really being that companies are only going to share what suits them. They might restrict it because of privacy. They might restrict it because they don't have it. But the real motivation for a company is share the information that's best for their operations, not necessarily what's best for government consumers. So flexibility is key. I think we're going to be able to, as we explore this content standard over the next few months, come up with some base information that everybody agrees is good, and then a number of other flexible components. And by floating that back to the companies, companies may begin to gravitate to sharing a little bit more rather than a little bit less. So the content standard had a useful lessons learned there. The SABER status map was another good example. SABER status map, it's a cooperative agreement with SpotOnResponse to use a SpotOnResponse instance as the SABER map. But it's not what SABER is. SABER is data. SABER is moving the data back and forth. But because not everybody has something to look at it in, we made the arrangement to do the SABER status map. And that in some cases either appears to be or may be held up as an example for other applications. And it's important to recognize that that is an example. And many other third-party applications exist. The status map, though, sometimes is sort of used as the gateway to the SABER data. That I've had people call up and say, listen, I'm sitting here looking at the status map. It's got all these great icons on it. And then I go over here and my GIS department has a whole bunch of triangles. How do I get the good icons? Well, that was something that SpotOnResponse and SABER invested in. And there are ways to do that inside of, in that case, it was an ArcGIS Online, that you can do that. And if you're using a Google Earth, I can actually provide you with a link to all those icons and a way to create a set of network links that will put those icons on your Google Earth. But you got to do the work. So by looking at the SABER status map, in some ways, it positively influences people. In other ways, we create this image that, okay, well, gee, I couldn't do that, so I'm not going to do anything. So the point here is that we want to make sure the SABER status map is not influencing future commitments to SABER, because SABER is data. The features, performance of the status map are just illustrative. And anybody can do it, but they have to do it. So that's why we continue to work with, and you saw examples of Google Earth and ArcGIS Online. And during this exercise, actually, there's one that we also put in place in GeoCollaborate, and I didn't have a picture of that on there that I should have. So you can have lots of different applications, and our real point here is that data is what SABER is all about. And I mentioned icons. Icons are another thing that the SABER status map is built to incorporate very, very quickly. And many of those icons come from DHS-supported icon standardization projects. However, we're talking about the private sector, and the private sector says, gee, I want to have my Target bullseye or my little Walmart flower burst there. That's what I want to see as my icon. SABER can support that. Whether the end user application can or not is going to be dependent on that. So our lesson here is that people are going to want to adapt their icons, really even on the fly, especially when you get new members who are coming in during an emergency. So SABER-based utility, perhaps, to help create and upload those icons, expose them out to the internet so that any other application can get them, would be one of the lessons that we took from this exercise. Finally, ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online, the most popular GIS software for common operational pictures. And it consumes KML and GRSS formats, which XchangeCore provides. And it consumes an Esri version, Esri JSON version, which is a derivative of GeoJSON, which SABER provides. When you're in ArcGIS Online and you do a KML, Well, you can't do anything that's not a feature layer. They're just dots up on the map. You can't even change the icons on them. If you do a GeoRSS, again, you can't turn it into a feature layer. It's dots on a map, but you can change the icons to those that are provided by ArcGIS Online. GeoJSON, you can turn it into a feature layer and do all sorts of manipulation with it, turn it into tables, do wonderful things with it because it's a better set of data according to ArcGIS Online. However, XchangeCore and SABER, data is changing all the time. Thus, we provide our GeoJSON as a dynamic feed. ArcGIS Online only consumes GeoJSON from a file. Thus, you can't go off and hit the dynamic feed from XchangeCore and have it dynamically change what you have in your ArcGIS Online. Basically, I have to download it, process it into a feature layer, put it into ArcGIS Online, and then you see what was current a few minutes ago. And then you have to remember to do that again. So a lesson learned coming out of this, and if anybody has a way to do this, who's an ArcGIS Online expert, tell me about it. We've asked many times. So if you have a resolution for this, I'd love to hear it, because we've made the recommendation to ArcGIS, to Esri, that they should allow the consumption of a GeoJSON feed the same way it allows consumption of a KML and RSS feed, and update the feature layers that have been created from that dynamic layer. So, last of the lesson, no, one more lesson learned. That's right, JSON, GeoJSON. XchangeCore provides GeoJSON format. The SABER connector at the present time only ingests a CSV format from a spreadsheet, or there's an XchangeCore GeoRSS injector that Walmart uses that moves the GeoRSS formatted data into XchangeCore. JSON continues to emerge as a dominant format among internet newer applications. And a lesson learned coming out of this is that a JSON, GeoJSON injector for XchangeCore may move more companies into SABER that using a automated format with the GeoJSON than those who have to do the spreadsheet and do that quick win option too. So that's another thing that we all want to take a look at. And with that, let's see, here are the questions page. Let me see the slides. Yes, Christine asked me a question here saying, may we receive the slides to this? Yes, Christine, the slides are made available. The entire webinar is recorded, and there's an XchangeCore YouTube channel that I'll send you a link to, but an XchangeCore YouTube channel that actually has the last 4 years worth of webinars. So thanks for that question. Okay, so coming back over here, Ardent Sentry. Exercise conducted at least annually, sometimes it seems more frequently than that, by the National Guard. The part of Ardent Sentry 2017 that SABER XchangeCore was involved in, and it really was the XchangeCore technology more than SABER as an organization, took place between the National Guard Bureau and the Virginia National Guard. Goal was to exchange incident information between XchangeCore operating on a civilian network and military version of XchangeCore, which is called Keystone, operating on the .mil network. .mil to civilian. It's a pretty big leap. Proof of concept objective that was established was for that Keystone XchangeCore connectivity. Have a two-way exchange, incident information. What was generated by the Virginia National Guard in software that they're implementing now called VaNGuard, beautiful piece of software, and incident information that is generated by the National Guard Bureau's Joint Information Exchange environment. And The whole goal is to move information from those two disparate applications, VaNGuard and JIEE, through XchangeCore Keystone to share information. The architecture for that was an XchangeCore Beta 2.0 and the Keystone Core 1.3, which is the current military version. We use the latest set of adapters for both Keystone, for VaNGuard to connect to XchangeCore and JIEE to connect to Keystone. VaNGuard XchangeCore was deployed out on the cloud and was made available to exercise participants in the Virginia National Guard Joint Operations Center who were using the VaNGuard software. The VaNGuard XchangeCore established core-to-core sharing with National Guard Bureau Keystone, which was hosted by the U.S. Army's Armament Research Development Engineering Center. And the JIEE adapter was connected to the JIEE software hosted by the National Guard. To help you understand that one, we actually have a picture. So on the left-hand side, bottom, Virginia system, connector to the Virginia JOC XchangeCore, out to the internet. Touches National Guard Bureau Keystone, that connects to the JIEE adapter, that connects to JIEE. And then an adjunct to that system was inside of the .mil network, and that should actually be private internet, goes out to the U.S. Northern Command that is using a different software called SAGE. So we had lots of things under play here, and it ended up being a very nice example of what we can do. And I thought it'd be useful to start with a little case study here in connector development. The things that you need to do when you're starting with something as complex as what you just saw. We first sat down and mapped the JIEE incident data to the VaNGuard incident data. Figured out what the comments, or like I just described in the content standard, what the common data elements were and where the unique elements were. Then you take that JIEE information and map it to the XchangeCore NEAM incident work product. What goes into NEAM standard data formats and what's left over there. And then do the same thing with VaNGuard, saying, okay, now we've already mapped the data, so if I have a name that is going to go into activity category text in the NEAM incident work product, that has to match up with JIEE putting their name, which they may call subject, but that subject has to go into the activity category text. And in that way, even though it's called name in one place, subject in one place, XchangeCore becomes the common element, activity category text, and each then moves the data back and forth to their own adapter and puts it in the right place in their own application. So that mapping becomes part of the very basic part of what we do. Secondly, somebody has to sit down and do those connectors. The VaNGuard connector was taken right from the XchangeCore open source code repository as the building block for making that VaNGuard connector. And it was a JSON connection that allowed you to go in and grab and put information into the VaNGuard through an API in a JSON format. The Keystone connector did the same thing with JIEE. I'm not completely familiar with what kind of a format they were talking about inside of JIEE. Then you have to do something that was pretty important, create a .mil to civilian internet firewall exception, which is called whitelisting, and you literally say, I will allow this specific internet IP address to talk to this particular IP address, one on the inside, one on the outside, and it's going to go through this particular port. something every network administrator knows how to do, but it's something you have to do to connect Keystone to XchangeCore. And then tested that connectivity, tested the connectivity between JIE and Keystone, between VaNGuard and XchangeCore, validate that all that mapping was taking place in exactly the right way to get JIE information to VaNGuard, and then validate the mapping from VaNGuard through XchangeCore back to JIE. So those are the fundamental steps in doing a pretty complex pair of adapters. Now we'll take a look at some of them. Here is the executive dashboard of JIE, and it has particular events that are there. You can see they're using the map. They've got the listing up in the upper left-hand corner, and it's showing incidents were created in JIE and VaNGuard. Then those things that went up to SAGE, SAGE has lots of stuff going on. These aren't all the exercise things, but you can find that one, the communications event that we just saw previously, that was shared from JIE to SAGE. And you'll note that this is a Google Earth program, so although XchangeCore's output didn't have anything to do with it, that ability to move that information back and forth from JIE to Google Earth could possibly also have been done by XchangeCore. Good example of the fact that if there had been no connection between JIE and SAGE, they could have had one without doing any work, because once JIE got connected to Keystone or XchangeCore, SAGE would automatically connect to Keystone or XchangeCore because Google Earth connector is already finished. This operation would have happened at no cost and no time. Somebody did that previously, but the power of XchangeCore lies in looking at instances like this where you say, you know what, that connection just happened automatically, just like we saw with GeoHealth. All right, that information then went into XchangeCore. Here's the XchangeCore Management Console. It's showing incidents that originated in JIE. You see on the left-hand side, simulated from JIE, and then you have that Rail and the Frago ones. Those are coming out of other operations. And then on the other side, here is VaNGuard that is taking the information, and here is a JIE incident. All little markers there indicate that they came through Keystone, and it's that same communications modified by JIE or by NGV that we saw earlier. Then we get a VaNGuard, and this is you'll see this is a lesson learned, so I'll only touch on this briefly. VaNGuard created incidents. They went over to JIE. JIE said, oh, here, we want to change this. Put it back into XchangeCore. VaNGuard says, we don't want you messing with our data. So instead of just rejecting it, they said, let's create a category of XchangeCore data that we will call VaNGuard incidents that have been modified by JIE, which is a valuable thing to have. And that's what all these little circles are there, and there's a layer in VaNGuard now that says, hey, this is something we started in Virginia. VaNGuard, or JIE made some addition to, change to, correction to, and this is where we go to look at the information. Core-to-core exchange showing the VaNGuard transferring XchangeCore and then to Keystone and then to JIE in this incident where we've got a JIE airplane incident that showed up on VaNGuard. We also, although it wasn't part of the formal exercise test, connected other applications. And important to this, and we'll talk about that other pesky data, that non-compliant data, because this shows why the other pesky data best practice that XchangeCore established is valuable, in that not all this data fit into a mean incident format. Bunch of stuff like, let me pick one out over here, my position log ID, my date ID, and my primary name. I'm not saying which ones are or aren't, but all those things were there. And if you look at JIEE, if I recall, there were probably 35 data elements. And you look at VaNGuard in the mapping, and I'm going to say there were 20. So you got 10 that don't immediately don't match. 5 of each of the other ones don't match. So I got 15 that don't match. Then you map that to the NEAM standard, and 5 more don't match. So I end up having, say, 10 data elements that are common and were part of NEAM, and up to 30 more, 20 more, that I don't want to lose that data. So that's where the other pesky data best practice comes in, of wrapping that information in HTML format. Told you that story to tell you this one, that many applications display HTML. So at no cost, no effort, this application happens to be SpotOnResponse. This application connected to XchangeCore on the civilian side was able to take and nicely format all the information that had come from JIEE, had come from VaNGuard, and had never ever been seen by anybody who ever used SpotOnResponse before. Never saw it before. But by putting that into the common format in XchangeCore, boom, I've got very intelligible information. Same thing with Google Earth, proving the same point. Look at all that nicely formatted information there, right latitude and longitude, and that's the power of the XchangeCore. Moving here, we now have starting to lay more complexity on this. We got those Keystone squares in the background. You saw that. Got all the purple triangles. Those are layers. That's a layer of information that is created by Keystone, comes from Keystone, from JIEE, the purple triangles from VaNGuard, and now lay that in with the other pesky data, and you see this nicely formatted display of that HTML information from somebody who I never met before. Inside XchangeCore, just to give you this thing you can squint at, the NEAM standard format on the left-hand side and XML, it displays in the management console on the right-hand side, and that's something that nobody ever looks at. The end result being the ability to build this wonderfully complex integrated system with incidents and missions and force packages and information from inside, information from outside, thus forming all the relevant data that's necessary. So now, let's take a look at the lessons learned coming out of Ardent Sentry. First of all, updated in 2.0. Keystone needs to get upgraded to XchangeCore 2.0. As I mentioned, we had to roll back XchangeCore to an earlier 2.0 beta version, which was last used in 2014, because that's the last development that was done on Keystone, 2014. Its deployment is about to begin, and because during that time, people had developed advanced handshaking to assure work product delivery and core-to-core sharing, 2.0 doesn't connect with the older version that is Keystone. But that's not a huge deal. The XchangeCore 2.0 current version is available in the XchangeCore code repository and GitHub, and every user of XchangeCore should use that to maintain compatibility. But when we talk about compatibility, we're talking core-to-core sharing. If you're only using a single XchangeCore, upgrading to successive versions is seamless because of a commitment we made years ago to maintaining adapter compatibility. So I can take an adapter from an old 1.3 XchangeCore and it will work on a 2.0 XchangeCore with, I'm going to say, little to no change. There are a couple changes that took place in .NET code for security, and you have to change SSL to TSL inside of your code, but it's really pretty straightforward to maintain the compatibility. So no need to roll back any of the adapters. Adapters that were used in this exercise were both new, previously created, and they performed without any problems. Exchange it between the current version and the newer version. In fact, as part of an experiment, we did have a 2.0 operating that was moving this data around. The other pesky data, I touched on that a couple of times. It really is an important best practice to be able to package data that has not been thought of by a standard setting organization, package it in a format that becomes readily unfoldable and interpretable. And we've selected HTML. Everybody can read HTML. It stores relatively compactly. And you can also put it into a statement that allows it to pass through the XML in particular, code validator, and the standard validator to move that data from one side of an operation to the other side of an operation and not lose the previously unconsidered data when you're moving it back and forth. So the other pesky data best practice definitely was a success as part of this. Next one, an important one. XchangeCore enables owners decide. So XchangeCore concept of operations calls for end user data owner applications to maintain control of their data. VaNGuard as a data owner specifically prohibited in its design the display of any VaNGuard data that had been altered by somebody on the outside. Security, conceptual, procedural, whatever the reasons were, hey, we're going to own this data. NGB, however, wanted to test the ability of JIEE to update VaNGuard data, meaning state data, that had been edited or updated by JIEE. XchangeCore is completely neutral on this discussion. It doesn't restrict the update of work products by any user. But what it does is record that update and allow data owners to say, whoop, nope, I see the key here has been changed. You can't change the key on my XchangeCore data. I'm not letting this in. Or they can say, key's been changed, the ID matches, this is different, I'm going to put it over here. And that's exactly what VaNGuard ended up doing, was saying, okay, you may be saying something important to us, NGB, and what I'm going to do is create a separate layer, and if it comes across and it says, here's an XchangeCore incident product, it has an incident ID that says I created it, but it has its status ID is different than what I provided. I'm going to stick it over here, knowing that you changed the version number and useful information, but don't mix it up with my information. So very, very valuable lesson, example of the utility of XchangeCore and the continuing value of allowing end-user applications to decide what they do with the data. Content standard, mentioned that one before. This one I'll only say didn't get a whole lot of value out of contribution to the content standard, except to say that it's going to be very difficult on even the National Guard Bureau side to define a content standard for all the states. Equally difficult for the civilian side, and thus other pesky data we maintain is probably going to be valuable even in a much more controlled environment like the military. In conclusion, let us support your next exercise. SABER is always available. Exercise designers should take advantage of SABER as a simulation source. The SABER connector, the one that does the CSV spreadsheet upload, is a really quick and easy method to create simulated incidents. So instead of perhaps even sitting down for your common operating picture and somebody typing into something like a WebEHC or other, type an incident in and say there, it's part of my simulation, type an incident, say it's part of my simulation. I can pull information into a spreadsheet very easily, enter it through the SABER connector into XchangeCore, and have it appear on your WebEHC or your ArcGIS Online, and it can become really an exercise generator, and we have used the tool in that regard. Particularly unanticipated data elements. If you're saying, gee, do I wonder whether people will need X or Y or Z as a data element, try it out in an exercise. XchangeCore other pesky data can allow you to display that. SABER map is there and available if you need it. If you don't want to do any kind of integration in your own application, you can pull the SABER map either into an EOC or a mobile device use and use that during an exercise. And then finally, because XchangeCore already provides common feeds for viewing in ArcGIS Online and Google Earth and other applications, as well as the SOAP connections, the one that I explained earlier, into WebUC and eTeam and a number of other applications. So don't hesitate to ask for information on how you can use SABER in your exercise. And with that, I'll only ask you in the last minute that we have, take a look at the updated XchangeCore website, have the new XchangeCore movie there. And at this point, if anybody wants to raise their hand, I'll take any questions that you might have. And Christine learned how to raise her hand. I can't really, oh, there's Alyssa. Let me click to unmute you. And you should be live now, Alyssa.
Yes, hello, Jim. Good to listen to your presentation. Thank you for this. I see that that this was recorded, and I presume perhaps that on your website, which I haven't looked at yet, would this slide presentation as well as the recording be available?
Yes, it'll be available probably within the next 3 or 4 days. So, and okay, a link to it will go out. Link to it will go out in the next XchangeCore newsletter, but also make a note to shoot you a quick email and let you know when it's available.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Anybody else? Christine. Oh, I should have unmuted you, but Christine just asked what national level exercise XchangeCore is participating in. We just did the, as you saw, the Gotham Shield and Ardent Sentry, and don't have any others scheduled. We have a summertime exercise out in California and then a fall one also in California. And I think we're about to agree to 2 state-level hurricane exercises. So continue to bounce around out there. And please go ahead and let me know what it is that you might like to see us participate in. The contact information down here in the bottom right-hand corner. We'll be happy to help. All right, seeing nothing else, let me thank all of you for hanging around for this time. Hope that it was beneficial for you. And we will be doing this again next month. So watch your XchangeCore newsletter, and we'll keep you posted. Thanks, everybody.